Hi, this is Kyra with Running Ready. Today we're going to go over some tips and tricks on how to improve your running form. Now, we should always spend some time making our running form as efficient as possible so as not to waste any energy as we go. Especially on those long run days, efficiency is definitely an important aspect in your run. So here are some tips and tricks to help keep you efficient as well as minimize your chances of sustaining injury. Okay, now when we break down running form, we're going to talk about the top all the way down. Now because something called the kinetic chain exists, which is how every joint and every segment move and how that movement affects the next joint and segment, we can also talk about our feet all the way up. But for purposes of today, let's start with our head. So the first part of running posture and running form is actually having that proper head, neck, and shoulder posture. So here, if I make an L, I put my index finger right here on my chin, and I drop my thumb down, it should actually land right in this sternal notch. This is proper posture for running and proper posture for every day. What I also want to make sure I'm doing is instead of having this rounded shoulder, my shoulders are back. So you see if I have this L right here, my shoulders are back, then my ear should automatically be over my shoulder. Now that starts to follow something called your anatomical plumb line, and that's going to be important when we talk about regular posture, especially for running posture for this up top segment, okay? Because as you run, you go into a forward lean, a mild forward lean, but it still is a forward lean nonetheless. Now, when I go into this forward lean, what I want to make sure I'm doing is still keeping that plumb line intact, okay? So I go here, I don't allow my neck to kind of get lazy. I don't allow my shoulders to come here. I don't let myself get into this enclosed posture because that's going to affect the amount of momentum and the energy I use and get rid of and my inefficiency when I'm talking about the way my arms and my shoulders should move, right? So that kinetic chain, the way that my neck and my head are positioned as well as my shoulders are then going to affect my arms. So let's talk about arms. All right, so now that we've talked about our head and neck posture, we're gonna go ahead and move down the kinetic chain and talk about our arms and our shoulders. Now, let's use our arms because they're gonna create momentum down all the way through our legs, through our feet, to the ground as we're running. So really use your arms. Now what you wanna do here is make sure that as your arms are going, they're not crossing your midline. Because you think about the plane of force and that force transmission, as I go from here to here, my body wants to be propelled forward. If I'm like this, I get into a rotation. Now what's really important when you're using your arms and that momentum is that your core is also staying tight. Why is this? It's because your core acts as the force highway to transmit that momentum and those forces from your arms and your shoulders all the way down through your legs. Now our hands are also going to be important. We want to avoid any excess muscle tension or anything like that so that we don't get cramping. So a little hint for some people is that they'll tell you either to hold your hands like you're holding little baby ducks, little chicks, or like you have a potato chip in your hand that you don't want to crack. So instead of being straight like this and in a tight fist, everything is nice and loose as I'm running. Okay, now let's continue moving down. So we're going to talk now about our hips and kind of our trunk area. And we're going to talk about a little bit of a forward lean here as we're running. Now, if you remember, I talked about making sure you keep that L with your neck as you go into a forward lean. What's important here is that you're not allowing your back to go into that lordosis, okay? Your core is already tight to help transmit that momentum, but now it also has to stay tight to keep your back nice. So I just slightly lean at my hips with everything in line, and that's going to create the best posture for you. Okay, now we're going to talk about what happens at my hips, knees, and ankles as I'm running. So I'm going to turn to the side here so you can get a better view. Now, we go from what's called triple flexion to triple extension. What that means is I'm flexed at my hip, I'm flexed at my knee, and you can see I'm in this dorsiflex position at my ankle, which is often referred to as flexion. Now, as I cycle through my run, you'll see as I come off on that toe off, I want to go into triple extension. My hip is an extension, my knee is an extension, and I go into that plantar flexion with my ankle, which is often referred to as extension of the ankle. So as I come up, I cycle through, and I go into that triple extension. Now, what's important here is that you can get up to that flexion and back down to that extension really quickly as you're doing your speed work. So it's often helpful if you need something to stand next to bring yourself up, strike through, bring yourself back up, and strike through. Okay, now we're going to talk about foot strike. So the way that our foot initially hits the ground as we run. There are 3 types: a rear foot strike, a midfoot strike, and a forefoot strike. So we're going to go through the 3. A rear foot strike is out in front of you. That's where your heel, your rear foot, hits the ground first. Now this transmits the most forces in the shortest amount of time up through the kinetic chain. So you have the most force here at your calcaneus, through your ankle, coming up through your lower leg, your knee, to your hip, and even to your low back. This is the worst kind of foot strike. But if you have this naturally, they make shoes that can help dissipate those forces. Next, we go into a midfoot strike. Now here you can see I'm kind of still in that triple flexion position that we talked about before. I'm landing kind of right in here in the midfoot of my foot. Now this is the middle amount of forces that can be transmitted. So it's not quite your most shock absorbing, but it's not necessarily the hardest force. Our third one, I'll have to switch my feet, is going to be a forefoot strike. Now, as I come through my cycle, you can see this is actually behind me a little bit, so I'm starting to get into that triple extension position. This is your greatest shock absorption position, so your least forces are transmitted up through that kinetic chain. Now, if you don't run like this naturally, don't change the way you run too much, because biomechanically it can screw a lot of things up. You can make some small changes, such as your shoe choice or your type of running, to kind of help make those changes, but you don't want to change everything all at once. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're looking for more articles and videos, some running quizzes, if you want to find out what type of runner you are, or maybe even pick up one of our awesome running plans, head on over to runningready.com, where you can also see our running equipment, including our incredible running belt, which is an essential for any long distance runner. Thanks for sticking around, and I look forward to seeing you next time.